The following was originally published in 2018, and while I stand by the critiques of The Last Jedi I make, I deeply regret any direct personal attacks I make against Rian Johnson, Kathleen Kennedy, or any other employee of Lucasfilm. Those comments were made in anger and frustration, and I will do a separate video about that after this series.
Last time we focused on the singular issue of feminism in The Last Jedi, and today's final Last Jedi episode will be talking about several other political agendas tossed into the film. Some of them are a little bit on the subtle side, but most not. Starting off with the agenda of anti-white male. This is one that really bothers some people, and also whenever it's brought up, tends to provoke a massive response from others saying that you're just being a racist or a misogynist or something. This one is a little bit odd because it's not really a left versus right issue, as opposed to the basic idea that since white men have been privileged in U.S. society for the first 200 years of this nation's history, that somehow discriminating against them now is a just and fitting penance. The only problem with this is that not every white male in this country has white male privilege, despite what the far left tends to think. The problem is in that those who champion this cause do not understand the correlation causation fallacy. So in this specific case, they do not understand that just because in the early days of this nation, up until probably about midway through the 20th century, all privileged individuals were white men, that does not mean that all white men were privileged. I know it's difficult for some to understand, but there were poor, desperate, and oppressed white men in this nation's history all the way back to its founding. And they and their offspring did not oppress others. But in the eyes of the modern progressive movement, they are guilty by association. So how does this translate into the film? Quite simple. Although I will admit this is a bit more subtle than the feminism agenda, to be sure, the anti-white male agenda is expressed by making every white male character in the film, with the exception of Luke Skywalker and a couple of extras, an evil space Nazi. Now, I know that some have attempted to debunk this by pointing out Poe. However, Oscar Isaac is not white, and I am genuinely confused as to why people can't tell just by looking at him that he's clearly of Hispanic origin. Please note, I am not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that Oscar not being white is a negative on him or his acting. In fact, in The Force Awakens, I rather liked Poe as a character, and I loved Finn. But again, it is insulting and frankly racist and sexist in that they went out of their way to avoid casting white men in any kind of hero role. That's not just me making this up. J.J. Abrams said as much in interviews when The Force Awakens came out. But what about Luke? Well, that should be painfully obvious. Luke may be the one white male hero character in the film, but he is also, surprise, surprise, a bitter, angry, self-pitying, self-loathing, cowardly failure who attempted to kill his own nephew and then spent the next 10 years or so running away from the very problems that he created. In other words, Luke Skywalker in this film is exactly what the progressive left thinks of white men in general. They will, of course, always excuse themselves because, reasons. Just like how people like J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson try to say that we need to have female-directed Star Wars films while they are directing the films. If you really believe that, then why did you direct The Last Jedi?
Yeah, we need more female directors, but I'm going to continue to direct.
What? Fuck you, Rian Johnson. The progressive white male is one of the most interesting examples of hypocrisy in our society. And please, do understand, I'm not talking about your average liberal-minded person. I'm talking about the proud leftist progressives who talk about the evils of white men having wealth while they themselves are white men with wealth. But for them to be wealthy, it's okay because they support the anti-white male agenda? Fuck you, Rian Johnson. The next one is anti-rich / anti-business. Okay, this is obviously a staple of the progressive left. And don't get me wrong, The Last Jedi, while having this in it didn't do anything we have not already seen in a million other mainstream Hollywood films before. All business organizations are evil. All rich people are only rich because their businesses are doing evil things, and they are not only okay with that, they revel in it. And they not only revel in the evil of their business, but of course they just love being in a place with animal abuse and child slavery. While you could raise some interesting questions about war profiteering in the film, consider this. It's not like the rich people at AntiWhite caused the war. Just like I don't blame the Lockheed Corporation whenever one of their jet fighters is used in combat. In fact, the people of AntiWhite could not really be called evil at all, as they sold equally to anyone. In fact, the people of AntiWhite, based on Rian Johnson's own film, should be the heroes, as they are not interested in good or evil, but they are rich business people, so they must be bad. So it's made out to be a light, fun moment in the film when they are killed under a stampede. Further, the film reinforces the concept of guilt by association, as there is no consideration given to the employees that work at the casinos of AntiWhite, any residents who may not be weapons manufacturers or businessmen, and even the slave children. If they are killed in the stampede, well, it's their own fault because they are, there. Anti-meat. We're supposed to feel guilty because Chewbacca was going to eat a porg. And we're supposed to be happy that Chewbacca not only does not eat the porg, but allows a small flock of porg to live on the Falcon. This is just stupid. Look, I'm against animal abuse as much as the next guy, but I also recognize that the consumption of meat is a perfectly normal and natural part of existence. If you choose not to eat meat, I say more power to you, but not everyone is capable of making that choice. But in The Last Jedi, they take it to the next level. Chewbacca is not even human. He is a Wookiee, and based on, heck, just look at his teeth and his prior behavior from other films, he is clearly a carnivore. But despite this, we're supposed to think that eating meat is bad because porgs are cute. Next one, anti-theism. I know that some people might get upset for me including this, and I know that many of my audience are in fact atheists. But keep in mind, I'm not trying to argue against atheism in this video. That would be well beyond the scope of the video. I'm simply pointing out the various political agendas that are included in this film. Further, anti-theism is very different from simple atheism. Atheism is a simple lack of belief in God or gods, but anti-theism is more the belief that not only is the belief that God or gods exist is false, but it's also inherently destructive. So why do I mention anti-theism? After all, Yoda is still a Force ghost, the Force is still the source of the Jedi and Sith's power, there's still light and dark, right? All true. But what this movie does is not change what the Force can do, rather what the Force is. In the 7 prior films, the Force is this all-powerful entity, the living force that is connected to all living things. The Force has a clear will, and the Force is the source of the highest moral standards of good and evil. Now, the Force is still a powerful energy, but no longer living, no longer conscious. There's nothing intrinsically good about the light, nothing intrinsically evil about the dark. In fact, there's nothing clearly separating the light and the dark at all, except that we are told that Snoke and Kylo are dark, but that's pretty much all. In Rian Johnson's world, the Force is no more spiritual than electromagnetism, where there's a light side is like a positive charge and the dark side is like a negative charge. Not good or evil, just opposite polarity. If all that is simply atheism, why did I mention anti-theism? Because in conjunction with the naturalization of the Force, we have the realization that the religion of the Jedi is not only a false religion, but it is the cause directly of the existence of the Sith. Luke wants to ensure that the Jedi end in this film, because without them, there would be no Sith, and thus the galaxy would be a better place. Fuck you, Rian Johnson. Fuck you and anyone that thinks... Finally, moral nihilism. The last piece I'm going to cover is also what I consider the most inherently destructive and frankly dangerous. The idea that right and wrong, good and evil, moral and immoral do not exist in truth at all. This is certainly a picture painted by The Last Jedi. In the previous films in the franchise, it's always been about the continuous struggle between good and evil. But in this film, there is no real concept of good and evil at all. Kylo is no more evil than Rey. The light side and the dark seem to have no moral contingent. And there seems to be no reason for me as a viewer to really care about who wins the war, if you really even want to call it a war. The irony about this point is that while it's driven home by the post-Canto Bight scene where DJ reveals that the same bad guys that make weapons for the First Order also make them for the Resistance, it's also contradicted by Rose and Finn's moral clarity that the people of Canto Bight were evil. In what could have been a powerful scene, Rose and Finn could have realized that the residents of Canto Bight were not evil, and yet they caused the injury, death, and destruction in the name of a false belief, but instead, it's just never brought up again. And Rose kisses Finn as their friends are being slaughtered right behind them. Huh? After all, there's no right or wrong, no up or down, there's just pleasure and pain, and Rose seems to get off on causing pain while experiencing pleasure. Fuck you, Rian Johnson. The stupid thing about nihilism is that while it is easy to defend intellectually, after all, you can simply say that if there is no God or higher power handing down some kind of moral code, then morality is nothing but a man-made concept. And by the way, I would agree with that argument. But at the same time, while this film does make an argument for nihilism, it also tries to make eating meat out to be bad, animal abuse is bad, religion is bad, rich people are bad, white men are bad, etc. If you want to argue for nihilism, then none of these things can actually be bad. In the end, The Last Jedi is such a mess because the ideology it is founded on is inherently self-contradictory. So it is literally impossible to make it any other way. And so in the name of getting a glimpse into the mind of a nihilist, the only price was the heart and soul of Star Wars. And with all that, Star Wars as a franchise is dead. It no longer exists in the way that it once did. Gone are the days of space adventure, heroes and villains. All that is replaced with nihilism. Fuck you, Rian Johnson.
Hit the like button, you will. Likes lead to comments. Comments lead to conversations. Conversations lead to understanding. Go to Patreon and support the anti-trucker you must, if supporting his videos you want. Yes, support his videos. Then listen to this at the end of the videos. You will not